Welcome to another Wisdom Wednesday episode of the Alter Your Health podcast. I'm Dr. Ben.
And I'm Dr. Susanna.
And we are both naturopathic doctors who empower you to heal yourself through whole food, plant-based nutrition, as well as mind-body medicine. And we've got another great episode for you today, talking all about the emotional and energetic nature concerning the liver. And we know through kind of traditional classical, medicine, Chinese medicine and Ayurveda and such, the liver tends to be associated with anger and rage and these sort of emotions in terms of like the energetics that influence liver function. So we're going to talk about that kind of stuff and what to do with these emotions, how to feel them in a healthy sort of way, because by no means are we telling you to suppress your anger or feel less angry when you feel angry. That's certainly not the answer in any sort of healthy and sustainable sort of way. So we'll talk about what we feel like might be a better approach.
Yes, I'd also like to just acknowledge that we are not anger experts.
Yes,
yes,
I am.
We just like you are human beings.
Oh, I thought you said we're experts, anger experts, like experts at being angry. I was identifying with the expert at becoming angry.
Yes, well, we are certainly human beings, just like everyone else on this planet. And what that means is that we feel angry from time to time.
Yeah.
And we might even act out from that anger from time to time.
For instance, if you are joining us live, you might know that this is not our normal Wisdom Wednesday time. We had a little bit of a technical difficulty, and we might still be having technical difficulty in terms of our internet connection. Sometimes it, just as a little tangent, sometimes the internet connection really interferes with the video quality, sometimes not so much the audio quality. So we're sorry if this is kind of interrupted the video stream.
Yes. Anyway, let's start the conversation by talking about the brain-liver connection, specifically how the state of the nervous system directly affects the function of our liver. And remember, when we're talking about the nervous system, we often talk about the sympathetic branch and the parasympathetic branch of the nervous system. The parasympathetic branch being the rest, digest, heal, and detoxify branch of the nervous system.
Yeah.
So what that means is that when we are in a calm state, when the nervous system has we've upregulated parasympathetic activity, that's when the liver does its best work.
Yeah.
And it's detoxifying, it's helping with digestion by creating and secreting bile. It's supporting our immune system and all the wonderful ways that it does so. It's doing all the 500 amazing functions that the liver does.
Yeah. And that's why sleep, which I guess we didn't really talk about that much in Medicinal Monday, as being a therapeutic, important, practical therapeutic strategy to support liver health, getting a good night's sleep. Because when we're sleeping, of course, we know that our body is in a genuinely relaxed parasympathetic state. That's how sleep is our best medicine. But in addition, of course, just to recap Medicinal Monday, we talked about living a low toxicity lifestyle, which of course is being mindful of our food and our air and our water, things that are coming into our body, and how whole food plant-based eating is really mitigating our toxicity exposure by eating low on the food chain and also focusing on the nutrient density that supports all those liver detoxification pathways, etc. But we failed to consider another source of toxicity in our lives, and that's really the toxicity of our own internally generated emotional state through our thoughts that we're believing. And to put it simply, we could be eating the most pristine diet of like organic, fresh picked off the bush berries and whatever, like just all the good nutrition. But if we're in a state of anger, resentment, stress, whatever you want to call it, whatever you want to name it, if we're in that kind of stressful state, as far as the body is concerned, it's just stressed, right? If we're in that stressful state, our body is going to be not healing. We are going to be creating more dis-ease and disharmony in the body and less health. And we know that, we all know that, like we all feel that, we all know that conceptually and most likely experientially. as well. But again, what do we do with that knowledge? What do we do with that information?
Right. And I think what you're pointing to is that when we are feeling more of this stress, we're producing more stress hormones like cortisol, adrenaline, and the liver actually plays a big role in metabolizing these hormones and neurotransmitters to break them down. So if we are in that state of chronic stress and always generating this elevated amount of stress hormones, it gives the liver one more task it has to deal with, burdening the liver even more. And as you remember from our Medicinal Monday episode, the liver already has so much it has to do.
Yeah, it's got its hands full. So we don't need to overburden it even more so with our stressful thinking and ruminating and worrying and anxious thinking and future fantasizing and, which again, easier said than done. What's the practical way of approaching this?
Yeah. What is the practical way of approaching this? Because we've already mentioned that the liver is associated with anger and rage. It is the seat of anger and rage in the body.
And if it's okay with you, Susanna, I wanted to bring up a brief thing that you shared with me yesterday. You were feeling angry and you thought you told me that you want to, and of course, for those who don't already know, Susanna's 39 weeks, like full term pregnant, could be popping out a baby, like literally any moment. So anyways, you were saying how you don't want to deal with this like some stuff, and you're just going to like disconnect from your computer, turn off your phone, and you're just not going to deal with that stuff. And I was the stuff that was
me angry,
quote unquote, making you angry. And I was, of course, suggesting like, is that really the answer? Like, of course, maybe it makes sense in like a short-term phase. Like, I'm going to disengage with that for the day. I'm going to take a break from that for the week. But if we continue to relate with our life in that sort of way, then we're constantly going to be running around and trying to orchestrate and manage our lives to make our lives more peaceful, because we think that our peace and our well-being mentally and whatnot is coming from the outer circumstances that we can, if only we could like get that person to talk less and not call me, if only I could, get those guys to drive faster on the highway so that I can get to that appointment on time. If only I could manage my outer circumstances, then life would be better. And of course, that just leads itself to the perpetual rat race, I guess, in so many ways that a lot of us find ourselves in. And of course, we're inviting ourselves, and I was inviting Susanna to look in a different direction. Like, do you really need to do that to find peace and to let your anger go? Do you really need to unplug from that device? And again, sometimes it makes sense, but is that like really the answer is
it the long-term sustainable answer?
Is it the long-term sustainable answer? And is it actually getting to the root cause of where the so-called anger or stress is coming from?
Right. And, it's interesting because, this leads me to think of, a different kind of part of the conversation, which is that like when we are in a state of anger, like when we're really feeling it, it was good feedback you gave me last night, but I was still in my place of anger, feeling like righteous in my anger. Like, what? No, I've been harmed, and I deserve to feel this anger. And
that's the exact kind of theme of the liver energy, is that victim, righteous, harm, like kind of mindset.
Oh, totally.
So how's your liver feeling today?
Oh, it's feeling much more peaceful today. But that's the beauty. That's the beauty of our human experience and the weather of emotions, how we can feel something so intensely one moment and give ourselves some time and just let that experience dissipate, right? We let that storm pass. And last night I was feeling like, oh my gosh, the storm isn't going anywhere. I'm like obsessing about this and I don't want to be obsessing about it. And I was kind of judging myself for obsessing about the anger. But always 100% of the time, the storm does pass. So That's beautiful to acknowledge, but I think, there's still kind of this question of like, okay, well, what do I do? How do I relate to anger healthfully? How do I relate to it in a way that supports my liver and supports all of my other bodily functions, right?
Yeah. How do we? And I mean, if you're throwing that question to me, the way that I try and do my best to relate with anger is the same way I try and relate with all of my human emotions, which is that it's just that. We brought up this idea a few weeks back about emotions being energy in motion. That's what emotions are designed to do: stay in motion. Like an object in motion stays in motion, right? There's some law of physics until acted upon by another force or something like that. So our emotions stay in motion. Like that's what they're designed to do. But we, in our innocent human tendency selves, stop them within ourselves and hold on to them and keep them from moving through us. And that's where things can get problematic. So it's not anger that is a problem. Anger is just as much of a part of our human experience as joy and peace and enthusiasm and inspiration. Anger is just as much of our human experience. Hopefully we're experiencing more of the inspiration and peace and less of the anger. But that's to say that there's nothing wrong with feeling anger. It doesn't mean that we're broken or damaged. It just means that we're working. We're in our human experience fully. And the way to relate with that is to let that go, to let that move through us. And again, I feel like I'm again kind of like an expert with this because I have I am recovering from, I feel like I'm mostly recovered from holding on to anger for a lot longer than I ever needed to. So I was like I had developed like calluses from just gripping the anger. And it doesn't feel good. And that's kind of the ironic, paradoxical thing is like, oh, this sucks.
Yeah.
How do I
It
let
feels
it go?
awful. It's
How do
like
I
you're
let it
punishing
go?
yourself.
We are punishing ourselves, but
Mhm.
in my case, it came from that egotistical, righteous victim mindset. Like, and if we, I don't know if there's like a right or wrong way to letting things go, because the kind of ironic thing is that they're already gone. Like it's the anger that we're feeling is just delusion. We're in the delusion. We're not in reality. In reality, we're in the present moment where that energy, we can't contain it. It's moved through, but we're like, in our humanness, latching on and sucking it back. So it's like the letting go is such a passive thing. It's not an action that we have to take or a practice that we develop or a skill that we need to master. It's like built into us to let things go. And I think that a lot of people are kind of programmed or trained, or what's modeled is holding on to, what's modeled for us, from, through society in all ways is holding on to stuff and victimizing ourselves and being right or wrong or good or bad, and holding these grudges that again punish no one except for ourselves, and from a emotional kind of relationship standpoint, and of course also a physiologic health standpoint.
Yeah. What's interesting is that what's also modeled in society, like you're saying, kind of holding on to stuff and kind of complaining about stuff with each other, right? That's modeled in society. But another thing that's modeled in society is also actually kind of suppressing anger. I think, for a lot of people, they grow up feeling like it's not okay to express anger. If you express anger, you're kind of a bad kid.
I grew up with kind of the message that anger was actually the only thing that was okay to express, or not the only thing that was okay to express, but if I wanted to be heard and if I wanted something, then having anger and communicating from anger was a great way to get heard or get something.
So yes, it's a complicated emotion that society relates to, right? But yeah, I think it's important to acknowledge that suppressed anger, kind of unacknowledged anger, is not any kind of long-term solution either, and that's obvious. We've talked about this before, just especially like the work of Dr. John Sarno, which I love. He talks all about how suppressed rage. A lot of people like I would identify with this. Like a lot of people have deep-seated rage that they don't even really know about, that might come to the surface from time to time on very rare occasion, but and when it does come up, it scares them, right? So they try to push it back down.
So what has been your experience and process with because I think we come from anger and rage from very different perspectives. Like for me, it's like really easy, super easy to get angry, super easy to throw a temper tantrum. And, I've, like I said, have been recovering from like letting it go. I used to say that, like, I used to have this emotional hangover that would last weeks or months, it's like something would happen, I'd have this, and then I'd just kind of keep it with me. And now the emotional hangover tends to last, minutes, maybe seconds, maybe an hour. I don't know. Susanna would know better than me. But
it's much faster.
Cool. Yes. So, but anyways, that's kind of my experience of like, I've had no problem feeling the rage and letting it go through me. But what has your experience been with like allowing yourself to be in that?
Yeah, I'd say that my pattern has definitely been to not acknowledge when things don't feel right to me, to not really acknowledge, the no or my boundaries or whatever. And it'll kind of build resentment to the point where at some point it kind of bubbles over and explodes. And, I would say that for me, it's really been a journey of acknowledging my inherent wealth, my inherent power. It's okay. Did I say wealth?
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's like,
worth.
Well, I guess worth and wealth is they're synonyms. They're just kind of used differently sometimes.
My inherent worth, my inherent power, that it's okay to say no. It's okay to like have boundaries. That's all okay. And that's healthy. But when that anger has bubbled up, when it does bubble up, I think that sometimes it's so strong, there's this compelling urgency that I need to act on it and express myself from it and, let the person know how they've abused me. And, I really have, had that tendency of playing that victim. And what's interesting is I think, for what it's worth for the listeners out there, the thing that has really kind of helped me the most, in addition to kind of acknowledging that self-worth and just speaking up when things don't work for me and, boundaries and all that stuff. The other thing that I think how I relate to anger now is that when it comes up, it's an emotion to be felt, right? It's an emotion to be felt, and it doesn't necessarily have to be acted on. And interestingly, when we let the emotion pass, as it always does, oftentimes on the other side, if we look back at what we were angry about, either it's no longer like we kind of look at it and it's like, oh, wow, I was really worked up. I really created a lot of anger for myself. It's no big deal now. Or sometimes we look back at the situation and we say, okay, like that still has to be dealt with. But when we handle it from a balanced, grounded place, that actually allows us to actually resolve the issue and move on so that we're not stewing or perpetuating this kind of angry, injured victim state, right?
Yeah, I think that's a really important message. It's like we can still act and respond. It's like, oh, even if someone quote unquote does something wrong and we have to fix it, we don't have to fix it angrily.
Mm-hmm.
And when we try to fix it angrily, it feels really good to our ego, but in terms of our soul and in terms of practical resolutions and peace, there's often better ways. Yeah. Well, I think that about wraps it up.
I think so too. I just want to say, I think it's really cool too. When we do our whole food plant-based, or when we do our seasonal cleanse, oftentimes we hear from a few participants like, oh wow, like as I'm cleansing my liver this week, I've been feeling emotions just kind of come up from nowhere.
Quite common.
Yeah.
That being said, whenever I hear that, it's like I always think like, where else do emotions come up from? They generally come from nowhere. They generally just bubble up from within. We're trained to think like, oh, it happens all the time. Like, oh, you're angry. What's wrong? What happened? What did so-and-so do or say?
Mm-hmm.
And again, just reaffirming this delusional outside-in reality that is disempowering and false. It's not true. It's not our true reality. So anywho, but I think that what you're speaking to is, I feel like as we kind of nourish ourselves physiologically, nutritionally, we have a deeper capacity to feel and process and embody and transcend and integrate our energetic and emotional struggles, if you will. And, they can we can heal more wholly and become more, because that's what healing is, becoming more whole. And of course, we are more than just our organs and cells and physical body. We're multidimensional beings, and we can integrate this human experience, and nourishing ourselves nutritionally is a huge part of how we are able to feel more deeply, in my experience.
Wonderful. Well, I certainly hope to be back on Monday. Well, actually, I'm neutral about it. If I'm back on Monday, great. If I'm not, that means that I've got a sweet baby that I'm just loving up on, right?
Yeah. So I guess just some housekeeping. Yeah, we're continuing the podcast until a baby comes, at which point we're taking a couple of weeks off. And then I'll be resuming without Susanna. And I think that we're also almost ready for another shift with the podcast. So if you've got any questions or feedback or comments, feel free to leave them below, or, shoot us an email or message or whatever that might be. But otherwise, we just look forward to staying in touch and seeing you next time, whenever that might be.